Hello, and welcome to the Modern Romantic Podcast, where we celebrate and inspire romanticism through passionate people doing incredible things. Hi, I'm Trey. Emily will be joining us shortly. This week has actually been really fun. I found out that there are some local auditions for um, Little Shop of Horrors. So it's always funny whenever whenever I see an announcement, because I think, all right, the show is starting in September. I'm going to start getting ready for this. We'll need about a month for the rehearsals and everything. So auditions should be about this time. And I'm always wrong. Auditions are always much sooner than I think they are. So it happens about 2 weeks from time of recording now. And I'm a little bit in scramble mode. So uh, if you are listening to this and in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, uh, Little Shop of Horrors is being staged by Theater Charlotte, and auditions are July 13th and 14th. You can go to their website and sign up for an audition time slot. It's going to be a fun show. It's going to be a great time. Everyone should go out and have a blast. But with that, no fancy transition, no funny quip for me today. I'm actually really excited about our guest today. Today we have a, a lost my train of thought there. Today we have an incredible textile artist with us on the podcast, Bernie Dignam. Thank you so much, Bernie, for being on the podcast with us.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you. I want to let our listening audience know that you are currently in Ireland. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah, on the west coast of Ireland.
Very nice. I do have to ask, what is the weather like out there right now?
At the moment, it's quite, the temperatures are around, well, we have centigrade, so we're between kind of 13 and 15 degrees. So it's quite cool relative to the States, but it's dull. It's cloudy and a bit of a breeze.
Is it bad that I actually like that kind of weather as opposed to sunny weather?
Yeah, well, I think when you've got too much sunny weather, it can be nice. It's refreshing, and it's a beautiful part of the world. It's very scenic, stunning countryside, and very particular light that attracts a lot of artists.
I don't doubt it. I've never been to Ireland. The only European country I've been to is the Netherlands.
Hmm.
So I'd love to get to Ireland someday. Do you have any recommendations of places to visit or like must stops, must see
I would
stops?
think the way, well, like Ireland is quite small, but I find a lot of Americans, or particularly Americans, but tourists try to get in too much. So what I would recommend that you take it slowly and you spend a day or two in particular spots rather than trying to take in all the top tourist attractions. And usually things that are off the beaten track. There's a tourist trail called the Wild Atlantic Way, which goes right up the west coast of Ireland, um, which is quite stunning because the scenery changes every 50 miles.
Ooh, okay.
So yeah, so it's not like I took a trip from Delaware to San Francisco, and the scenery changed every 500 miles, and so it's quite dynamic, and yeah, a lot of it very beautiful coastline and mountains, not very high, but still quite dramatic, and valleys, and yeah. So I'd say the West Coast is would be where I would recommend, and steer away from the cities.
Duly noted.
Mhm.
I I'd always heard that Dublin was really nice, but maybe I'll rethink that and try some smaller cities.
Yeah, Dublin is. I'm from Dublin, and I mean, from a cultural point of view, Dublin has a lot of like National Gallery and different cultural theatres, and I mean, we're very well known for theatre. But yeah, it depends on what you're interested in. But it's a city.
Noted. I tend to like the smaller groups of things. Like when we
Yeah.
went to the Netherlands, like Amersfoort and Utrecht were some of my favorites. Just they were little hidden gems that you like in Amsterdam. So
Yeah.
love being able to find those like smaller places to go to.
Yes, Holland is about, Netherlands about a fifth the size of Ireland. It's,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's tiny. Um, yeah, and Ireland's pretty small relative to the States.
Still, even so, there's something just so, I don't know what it is. I have no Irish in me whatsoever, no Irish blood, but there's still something about Ireland that's still so appealing. And I know that's represented a lot in your work. But before we kind of talk about your work, you had said in our green room before the show started that you are an accidental artist. And I disagreed with you then, but for a listening audience, would you kind of talk us through how you got your made your way into artistry?
Yeah, I suppose I was always creative in that I enjoyed all kinds of just playing with materials and creating, whether it be drawing or sewing, embroidery or knitting. And I went and I studied design. I took a 4 year full time degree course in what was then called environmental design, which back in the 80s, environmental had a different connotation. It was about your environment, so it was 3D. So basically, the first 2 years concentrated on interior design, exhibition design, retail and display, and furniture design. And in the last 2 years, I chose to concentrate on furniture design. So, having studied design, it was a different route than going to a fine art college.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I that's where that was my initial primary degree was in furniture design.
And I know that you had said you said furniture. Is that because your dad, because he was an upholstery? Um,
Yeah, I didn't think about it at the time, but in thinking about it afterwards, it probably did have an influence in more ways than one. Because yeah, he was an upholsterer, he was a master craftsman. I would see wrecks of furniture coming into my home and out to his workshop, and then these amazing chaise longues going out, and he did it in the old way with horsehair and tax and no automation. It was just all hand done. But the other thing where the other influence I think he had is because he was an upholsterer, there was a lot of fabrics at home. And he was either commending the fabric as a good fabric to work with, or he would say, because sometimes the client would choose the fabric and they would choose the fabric for the design or the pattern on it rather than on the quality of the fabric. And
mhm.
he would complain that this was curtain material they're expecting me to cover this with. So when I went in my postgrad studies, I did a teaching diploma, and that introduced me to a lot of media that was on the art curriculum in secondary school here in Ireland. And there were a lot of textile techniques, which I immediately gravitated towards. And I think because of that familiarity with fabric and textiles, in the home as I was growing up, just resonated with me. So I started responding to the landscape through batik and weaving and felt making, which, the other thing I love are very ancient techniques that have, people like in Mongolia, they made their yurts out of felt. In Scandinavia, they made their shoes out of felt. Felt can be a very delicate, cobwebby textile, or they make washers for aeroplanes out of felt. It's a very tough material. And weaving is, I just find that very meditative. It's something I tend to do in the winter time, and I love to bring the summer colors into my weaves in the depths of winter. Kind of bringing in the colors of the flora in the middle of summer. It can be quite colorful here with, Montbretian, fuchsia, and rhododendron, and hydrangea all over the landscape. Yeah, so And then batik is an Asian technique for applying surface decoration to textile. Um, and then I was actually introduced to a group of artists and invited into a cooperative. And I met a very amazing woman, Margaret Irwin West, who was a printmaker. And we started exhibiting together as a group. Uh, Margaret is now 99 years of age, and she's still working. She's actually, there's a very prestigious exhibition here in Ireland, the Royal Hibernian Academy, that's held every year. It's an open submission. And she just had a piece selected for that exhibition. And she went up to Dublin to the opening.
That's incredible.
You know,
Congratulations to
it's
her.
incredible. Yeah, you should look her up, Margaret Irwin West. She has a couple of YouTube videos just, showing her work. And yeah, she's an incredible woman, very, very tenacious, always in pursuit of fun. Yeah, very. So she would have had a big influence in that. That got me interested in printmaking, and I just found printmaking offered me an opportunity to be more involved in telling a story and a narrative, and more to, in translating drawings, whereas my textile work was more intuitive and more a general response to a lot of my work, not all of it, is a response to the Connemara landscape because it's just such an amazing landscape. But like the textures and the colors and the shapes of the landscape, and having lived here for nearly 30 years, you've almost internalized um, those colors and those textures. And so they just come out almost spontaneously, intuitively. Whereas with the printmaking, it's more about telling a story. I've worked with issues like I had very loose boundaries. And in Connemara, we have, and in Ireland in general, I suppose most countries do, land boundaries are extremely important. And if there's ever any ambiguity around land boundaries, it can lead to feuds and, family rows and neighbors' rows. And so there's a lot of fences and walls, stone walls, particularly around the west coast of Ireland and in Connemara in particular. So I just did a whole body of work of print in lots of different print media, etchings and collograph and dry point and Sheena Cole, just using boundaries, land boundaries, as a metaphor for our own boundaries. And just if our personal boundaries were as clear as land boundaries, we'd have more harmonious relationships.
Consider my mind blown with such a statement. I don't disagree with you at all. I'm curious from a storytelling perspective, especially in printmaking. Like you said, it's a very storytelling type of art. How do you determine the way in which that story gets told? Do you have to consider shapes or colors or like even the type of maybe dyes or inks that you use? Like what all goes into that storytelling process for you?
I suppose for the printmaking, drawing would be a big part of it, which wouldn't, uh, it'd be hard to bring drawing into well, maybe into batik a bit, but like into the felting and the weaving. So I just find that I can record uh, my environment, and then I can, introduce that into the printmaking process through etching or through dry point. So it's more, yeah, it's just there's more of a process, I suppose, in translating that drawing, and I'm recording that drawing for a reason, and translating that drawing into one of the printmaking techniques.
I'm stunned. Again, I'll say you said you were accidental, but it seems like there is nothing accidental about what you're doing. There's so much art and so much intention in everything that you do. and I love that it's translated into the beautiful landscapes and the passion that you have for Ireland.
Yeah, but it's when you if you ever come to visit Ireland, it's very hard not to be inspired by the landscape. It is quite amazing. I have just a view of the 12 Bens, which are our local range of mountains, and
Mhm.
they're outside my door every day of the week, and they change every 20 minutes, every half hour, as the clouds pass over and the sun comes out, or depending on the day. Today, I can only see the foothills. I can't see that. It's like literally there's a layer of mist going across the top of them. So they can be completely invisible, or they can look like elephant skin, or they can look like suede. It just depends on what way the light is falling on them. Their textures change, their shapes change. Yeah, and then through and then we have very definitive seasons. So through the seasons, different flora come into the landscape, and the bog, the color of the landscape actually changes as you're getting into autumn, into more ochres and umbers. And then in the summer, it becomes green, and lots of different shades of green. And then you've got the different colors of the flora, and you can actually see that change of the entire landscape. So yeah, it never gets boring. There's always something different to record.
Uh, So you're not diminishing my jealousy at all by living there and describing it as you have. Have you ever considered writing? Because I feel like you would you would be really good at
Um,
selling people on visiting Ireland.
yeah, no, I don't. And I suppose the reason I call myself the accidental artist, which some people have thought that I'm putting myself down, is more that I didn't have an intention to be an artist. I've always been creative. I've always enjoyed solving problems. I've always enjoyed processes and materials. But to be actually showing my work, and to actually now, have a gallery in my studio and have people come into my gallery, and not always necessarily buy work, but like give me feedback on the work. And I just never saw that in my future. It's not something that I set out to do. It's something that kind of happened organically. And that's why I reference accidental.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I what I love is that you are also an art educator, and so I'm
Yeah.
curious. From growing up in a household that really supported creative endeavors for you and your family, how did that translate into your teaching?
Well, I suppose I grew up in a working class housing estate in Dublin, and quite a poor background. And so to be an artist is very hard to support yourself unless you've got some kind of, you've got lots of very good connections where people can commission work, or you've got some trust fund that you can live off, rather than trying to. So teaching was a very practical way of just making a living, and just being able to survive. And I suppose I'm the oldest of eight children, so I would have my siblings see me as quite bossy. So maybe teaching, was something that I gravitated to for that reason. Who knows? Um, but I've always enjoyed teaching, and I enjoy people. But I mean, on practical level, it was a way of just earning money and being able to pay the mortgage and survive. And I was lucky to be teaching adults. I taught adults for 17 years in Connemara, and I just retired I retired in September 2019 in order to run creative workshops from my studio.
Wow.
For and I had been running creative workshops from my studio on a part-time basis, and I decided to go into a full-time. And I was working with the tourist organization, and I had it all sorted, about to launch in March 2020. And that was kind of phew. And then I decided, we had a very strict lockdown here in Ireland, and I decided as things loosened up a little bit that maybe it was better to run a gallery because you could social distance easier. Whereas when you're teaching, you're up close and personal, you're over people's shoulders, um, and then and then it was all very unclear, and nobody knew if we were going to be, when it was going to be over, and I was working with tour operators, which meant that they booked made and I had bookings, but they were all got cancelled. But you then had to reintroduce yourself to the tour operators, and then they had to make new bookings. They booked a year in advance. So it meant that if I did go back into the creative workshops, it could be a year and a half, 2 years before I have clients again. So that's what kind. And then I thought, I've worked for over 40 years. It'd be nice to be able to live my life in a freer way now and just kind of, yeah, just, potter in the garden and, wait for people to come up the driveway and then go in and wash your hands and go in and meet your clients and talk about your work. And so that's what I've been doing since. So yeah, I think it was a good decision. Um, I think particularly Americans work far too hard.
Thank you. As, as an American, I appreciate that. But my natural tendency is to want to say, but no, we need to, and be like, I feel like that's part of the problem, is to think that we have to work that hard.
It's incredible. I mean, I even when I was teaching, because I have friends in the States, and like I would have 8 weeks off in the summer. I would have 2 weeks off. I'd have a week off in October midterm, 2 weeks at Christmas, a week in midterm in February, 2 weeks at Easter. So I had about 14 weeks off every year. And I worked 16 hours a week.
16 hours a week?
Yeah, now for a full-time teacher, it'd be 22 hours a week.
Okay.
But I didn't work full because I was doing my own stuff, part time. But I have friends in the States who were at the top of their game, and they had 2 weeks holidays every year. After they were in jobs for decades and they were specialists, and I just think life's too short.
Thank you. Yes. There's I don't know what it is about. Well, I feel like there are a couple of problems, especially here in the States, when it comes to the support of arts in general, and that like wanting to pursue art is considered, oh well, when are you getting a real job? When are you getting something that, actually pays something worth living? And for me, that shows how sometimes little people value the impact of arts.
Yeah, and I think they don't. It's the same in Ireland, and it's the same even within the curriculum. Because I don't think like you would get a lot of kids that don't perform well academically would be sent to the art class. And that's fine because I think most people are creative and there's way, and I don't think school really represents, the broad spectrum of intelligence. I think it basically values learning by rote, good memory, being able to regurgitate information and then forget it after the exam is over. Whereas I think with art, it's like, you're encouraging creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, observation, um, and that sense of, I mean, what I feel very blessed about being an artist is that I have the ability to create something out of nothing and get that sense of satisfaction when you know that you've done something that's beautiful, or that's a success, that's worked in one way or another. And I think to pass that on, I think that's a great tool to give people, to fight depression, to give them a sense of purpose, to, make them feel good. So I just think art is tremendous in what it can give children, particularly in tools for life. But it's not really, and in Ireland, particularly visual arts, because we would be very well known for literature and for music, poetry, playwrights, theater. So the visual arts are actually not so much now, but like have been historically not as valued. And it's interesting you were saying you were in the Netherlands. Like Netherlands is one fifth the size of Ireland, and Ireland is small. And look at the visual artists that have been produced in Holland. But then one of the reasons for that was because it was a big colonial power and that they had a lot of patronage. So they were able to, whereas Ireland was oppressed for 800 years and we didn't have a lot of money that we were going to be commissioning, large portraits or whatever, large pieces of works of art. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that art is not valued and yet has so much to offer.
I I think about whenever people say that it doesn't have value, or that either explicitly or they imply that it doesn't have as much value as, say, the bank CEO. And I think, all right, whenever you're bored, what do you do? And they go, well, I go and sit down and I watch something on television. Okay, who do you think creates these programs? Who puts these together? Artists. Do you want to go see a show sometime? Those are artists. Do you want to go to an art gallery? Well, somebody had to make something in order to put it into that art gallery. So there are so many pinnacle points at which people are interacting with some type of art, whether it be like television show or some kind of marketing campaign. There is an artist behind any of those items. So to say that it doesn't have value, or to imply that it is of less value than something else, is really, really enrages me. I was trying to find another way to say it, but truly enrages me as a person and as an artist.
Hmm.
That's me. I'm going to step off that soapbox now. Thank you. Um, Whenever it comes to you and your teaching for some teaching adults in particular, um, I'm curious, what was like the most creative thing that you saw someone put together as you were teaching?
Well, maybe not one particular. I mean, it's just people are quite interesting. Like, again, people come in, I can't draw, I can't draw, I can't draw. That would be, and they find it very scary. And there is that white page panic thing that, they have. But I used a really interesting practical book. It was my Bible for teaching art. And that was Drawing from the Right Hand Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards, which is a book that's actually a workbook, and you work your way through these 40 exercises. So I would have students come in who had actually signed up for a business certificate, but the director of the center insisted they do something creative. They do art for 4 hours on a Friday. And so they would actually be really reluctant students. They weren't signing up for an art class. They were signed up, but they would come into the art class and they would, they weren't interested in art. They didn't feel they had any ability in art. And I would apply this book and make them do these exercises. And after 3 months, it was just really gratifying to see their response to their improvement in how they drew. They weren't necessarily very good draftspeople after 3 months, but what they could produce was so much better than they expected. And they would be always so surprised and happily surprised that they had actually made that improvement. So that was something I found quite gratifying. And then the other thing, there's a very strong community here, which I'm very blessed with. It's not all about the landscape. And every year locally there were two festivals, and again, I suppose, celebrating the landscape. One was Sea Week, and one was Sea Week was held in October, and then Bog Week, because there's a lot of bog here, was held in springtime. And so, particularly Sea Week, there would be a festival in the local village, and the guy that was running the festival, Leo Hallisey, he would involve all of the schools. and he would get the primary school. And we're very lucky. We're very unusual locally here in the local village of Letterfrack. We have more than 500 people involved in education because we have a college, a third level, which a furniture college where they learn furniture production and furniture design. And that's connected to why I ended up coming down here as a furniture designer. I came down, that's another story. But anyway, Leo used to involve the college, and then we have a youth reach, which is a type of school for kids that don't perform well in the normal school, and then secondary school, and we have primary school, and we had the adult education centre. And we all took on an art project. So I would work with I might work with Batik doing banners that we would then put out on the street so that one year we made lanterns because it was in October, so it'd be dark by 7 o'clock, and it was this festival of light. And everybody would contribute. So there'd be these group projects that would all just come together. And it was absolutely amazing. It was amazing what was produced and the dynamism and the diversity of art projects and the scale of what could be produced when a group of people work together on a particular project was just amazing.
I would please tell me you have pictures of this somewhere.
They're pro. Actually Leo's retired now, and I'm retired, so I'm not as involved in it. But if I do find, I will actually do a bit of a search, and I'll send them on after the talk.
Yes. I hearing people talk about that, it's always so fun to see things come together, especially in a community. And I would love to see the final product because I go to business conferences every now and then, and they do team building exercises, and
Hmm.
that's where I find that I flourish. But I just love seeing everyone else's work and how the same prompt from one group changes
Yeah,
as it goes to other people.
yeah. That's also interesting in drawing when you give, like if we're doing life drawing and you put a particular group of objects in the center of the table, and then you've got the students around the table and how each student interprets that group of objects in a different way. They just see it differently, they present it, represent it differently. Yeah, it's quite quirky to see the same objects being, and they're all true. They're all, an honest interpretation of those objects, but they're all very individual.
Yeah. Well, and from that statement about perspective, I kind of want to talk about your works specifically. As I was perusing your website and looking at the things that you have available for sale and the different categories, I found myself drawn to the tapestries in particular, but I also love the texture of the different felt pieces that you make. So, first question of many, but first question: can you talk about how do you work with the felt? How do you work to make these incredible tapestries? What does that process look like for you?
Well, I'm working with carded fibers, wool fibers, and merino wool, which is very fine wool. It because it felts very well, and I buy my wool in pre-dyed. I did actually, and sometimes I have played around with natural dyeing and find things in the garden, but it's very very difficult even when you use mordants to make them very very fast because felting involves agitation and moisture. And so it means that if you're choosing green for, say, to represent the landscape, and then you've got blue for a stream or a river, the green can bleed into the blue, or the blue can bleed into the green, and it can just create murky things. So I tend to generally speaking, I buy my wool in pre-dyed, commercially dyed merino felt. And it's basically just wool fibers, which you lay out. And I suppose with 30 years experience, you just get better at it. But you lay it out and you blend them, but you then have to flatten it all out, and then you have to roll it and agitate it. And that agitation, because each wool fiber has barbs along the shaft of the fiber, when you're agitating it with the moisture, they tend to entangle and they pull together. So they stop being separate fibers and they create a textile. And it's what happens when you put your lovely cashmere sweater into a washing machine. And they all contract and uh, and they shrink. So so that's the basic, and it's a very, very simple process. If you Google felt, I mean, there's 101 YouTube videos showing how to lay out those fibers and how you actually felt something. Um, but then sometimes I will just do it straight. It's intuitive, and I'll just lay the fibers. And then sometimes I will actually create an element, like I will create the mountains, or I'll create a sky, or I'll create, the fields, and then I will collage them together. And I'll collage them together using a technique, dry felting or needle felting, where you've got, a needle that has barbs on the shaft of the needle, and as you push it into the wool, it tangles up the wool and connects the two pieces together. Um, so that would be basically how I would do the felting. But with felting, I incorporate a lot of silk into my work, and silk has like wool tends to have a very um, uh, flat finish, whereas silk has a luster, so it catches the light, and it just kind of creates a contrast and brings a luminosity into the piece that you can't actually get with wool. But felt doesn't have the same barbs on its fiber, so it doesn't actually felt. You have to, you're into sewing. I don't know if you're familiar with couching a thread. If, well,
No.
when you're embroidering, if you want to couch a thread, you sew over the thread to hold it down. And
Oh, okay. Yes.
yeah, so like with the silk, you have to do very fine little threads of wool each side of the silk, and it's the wool felts to the other wool and holds the silk in place. So yeah, there's little tricks you can use to actually incorporate the silk into the piece. Uh, but actually, if you're into textiles, I think you should give felting a go.
I do. Sometimes I'll make like for me when I go to conventions, sometimes I will forget to sew in a pocket to my pants.
Uh-huh.
So I'll have to carry around, wallet keys, those types of things
Yeah,
in something. So I will normally make a bag of some sort to put all that things
yeah.
into. So I might actually try felting, if it's possible, to felt a bag on the outside to make a nice design and just do a little something different.
Yeah, well, you can felt into, if you're into costume, you can felt into silk chiffon or into any open mesh fabric. So what happens is if you lay the silk chiffon, or it can be a synthetic, but once it's got an open weave, and if you lay fibers on top or beneath, the fibers will migrate into the silk, and you can create it's called Nuno felting. And I do use Nuno felting as well because it gives you, more textural effects. So there's so many things you can do with felt. It's fascinating. It's a really, and like the other thing I love about felting, from an education point of view, it's accessible. It's accessible for very young children, and it's accessible for very older people that maybe have dementia, because it's very tactile, and you can, when you're agitating, you roll it just to get it, into a pre-felt stage. Then the kids love it. You can put it in a plastic bag and whack it against the desk. As long as the impact is creating the textile, you're in the process of creating a textile. You can get it and you can throw it very forcibly on the ground. So you can have a very active art class using felt, and kids absolutely love it.
Not just kids. I would love that.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a very accessible medium. Weaving is as well, but weaving, some people can find weaving very tedious, whereas I find it very meditative. It's a very slow process. But with my weaves, I tend to use a lot of unusual yarns. I use yarns like eyelash yarns in order to represent grasses, and I use a lot of textural yarns. Um, yeah, so it's slow, and not everybody likes slow, but I see a question here. Sounds like art therapy in all the best ways. Absolutely, because it can actually get out frustration. You know, you can really take your frustration out on this piece of felt in a fun way, without hurting anything.
Sometimes I'll see the term that you had used prior to dry felting. I'd heard about that from people that make, oh goodness, what is it? Uh, there's an Etsy artist that will actually make your pet's face on it.
Yeah, you can sculpt with it. Yeah.
Hmm. So that's
3D.
where I know that from.
Yeah, you can do 3D felting using dry felting, needle felting. It's a very, very diverse medium. You can just do so much with it. And like I was saying, I think earlier before we started, was that you can have, you know, the most delicate cob, especially if you're using something like silk chiffon. You can have a very delicate looking cobwebby felt, but it's got structure because the silk is giving it structure.
Hmm.
And then you can, you know, they commercially use felt in washers for airplanes. So it can be a very tough material. Yurts are made from felt, shoes are made from felt. So you know, it can be very tough, it can be very delicate. It's a fascinating material to work with.
My mind is agog with all the new possibilities that you've unlocked. I can tell that you've been a teacher.
Yeah, 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 well, for a long time. Yeah.
Uh, outside of the textiles, you've mentioned how the landscape around you gives you inspiration. You've talked about how even working with the materials and the possibilities of having few to like no boundaries to yourself. But I'm curious, are what other inspirations do you have when it comes to the creation of your art?
Um, Sorry, I missed that because I was just looking at have you made wearable items with felting? I haven't made wearable items. I have played around with it, but not in a serious way. I just prefer to leave that to people who really know what they're doing. You know, when it comes to, and I suppose the other thing too is from a practical point of view, again looking at art, there's a cross between textiles is seen as a kind of lesser than painting here.
Mhm.
Fiber arts, it's kind of more a craft, so it's less valuable than a fine art. And then when you get into wearables, that's even more so because then it's functional and it's definitely more craft. And it's very, very hard to get a financial return for the effort that goes into making something. Whereas if it's a piece of fine art, people are willing to pay a bit more for it and you can actually get a return that makes it worthwhile, you know, if you want to make a living. Sorry, I missed that question. You'll have to ask me again.
I I will be honest, I have completely forgotten at this point, so it
It's
is.
about the landscape, and yeah, I mean, I suppose it's just that you go out on a walk and you just, you know, the sun hits something a certain way, you know, the way the hedgerows divide the fields, the way you know, people cut turf here. So, like, that creates marks on the landscape. Sometimes you can see evidence of where people grew potatoes during the famine because there's different and now we're asking, it's about inspiration because this is what inspires me. You know, you'll see where they grew potatoes because it leaves marks in the landscape. And it was just kind of, for some reason, you just want to try and capture that, and you just want to try and uh, interpret it and put it out there. And so, there's a project that I do most years. It's a local project run by an artist, Rosie McGurran. It's called the Inishlacken Project, where she invites artists onto an island just off Roundstone. And we go to that island. It's more or less, there's nobody really living on it. There, one or two people live there during the summer, but it used to be lived in, but there's a lot of broken down houses and rocks. And like, I can go in there for a few days and just draw. I can take one drawing and that can inspire, 4 or 5 pieces using different media. I can use a drawing to do a collograph. I can use the same drawing to do an etching. I can use the same drawing for a weave. And they'll all be completely different, even though the source is exactly the same.
I can see that. I can't think of the specific piece, but there were two pieces that I was looking at, and one was from your. Hold on, let me get this right. One was from the batik, and then another was from the felt that looked similar, and I could have sworn that they were like looking at the same landscape, but I was like, no, I mean it's got to be two different perspectives. So I'm happy to see like you that the differences in the textiles can still allow you to create something that's a different perspective of the same image.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm doing a body of work, I did a body of work in 2019 because the government are talking about banning the cutting of turf, which is something that has gone on for hundreds of years here, where people cut turf to burn. It's their fuel in the winter time. And it's on their own land, but because of the whole carbon, they just environmental issues, they want to stop the burning of turf and the cutting of turf. And I just decided I wanted to try and capture those marks on the landscape that creates, because, when they cut the turf, it leaves stripes in the land. And then when they foot the turf, where they pile the turf up to dry, that leaves different patterns in the landscape. And so that particular exhibition, I would have used every media. I had watercolor, I had etching, I had weaving, I had felt, I had batik, I had, all the different printmaking techniques, I had drawing. And some of those pieces would have been from one source, one photograph or one drawing, but they would look completely different, or they'd be interpreted differently, because the media dictates to a great extent.
I can definitely see that. And because of your success with your art, you've also been able to exhibit some of your work internationally. Has the way, sorry, one second, this question ready to go. Has the way your work is received outside of Ireland ever surprised you?
Yeah, apart from, I actually exhibited in Delaware and the Grand Opera House, and also up in Maine. But I get a lot of international people come to the gallery, and it is very, because like I said, in Ireland, textiles is kind of looked down on a bit as not quite as valuable. But I find French people, Belgian people, and Americans really do value the textile work. And maybe French and Belgians, because there's a very strong history of textiles there, especially in tapestry. But yeah, so I mean, obviously, it's nice to get that positive feedback from international people that but as I said, I grew up, I was born in a working class housing estate that was actually quite stigmatized. So I love to challenge elitism. I love it. And so I love to put I was very, very lucky when I got invited into the artist cooperative, because I have exhibited with some really, really successful artists. And my work alongside those artists I've really enjoyed challenging that notion. And it's interesting because I'm actually at the stage, for years, I framed my work behind glass and behind mat board, because I wanted to present it the same way that art is presented. And now I want the textile to sing on their own. I don't want to put it behind glass anymore. I want it to just be a textile. I want it to speak for itself. I have one behind me, which you can't really see there, but it's quite a big one. And it's just a wall hanging. So it's actually flexible.
Oh, I thought that was a painting. Wow.
It's a wall hanging. And then the other one is framed. That particular piece on the my left hand side here. I don't know. I'm left handed, so I often get very confused about left and right. Um, that was based on a response to the Hubble telescope images. And this is called Fragile Earth. It's actually a 3D piece. The center piece, the Earth, is actually a semi-sphere. So it's not flat, it's three-dimensional.
Okay, that's incredible.
Yeah, so it's not always, it's not everything is not the Connemara landscape. Sometimes it's personal issues, sometimes it's a commission. I got a commission for some event in space that was captured by the Hubble telescope. And when I went to do the research to do the commission, I just discovered these absolutely astounding images and decided I had to do a whole body of work around them. And then that body of work ended up being shown, it was accepted actually in a lot of observatories around the country, and I showed it in Dublin in one of the observatories for Science Week. But it was going to take a lot of finance to travel to show it all over the country, and so I just showed it once, and then I have it in the gallery now. So it's not always Connemara landscape. There are different things will pique my interest, or I might get a commission, or it might be a personal issue that I want to actually, work through, or so different inspirations.
Sorry, I'm still blown. This whole time I was going to comment on that, what you said was a wall hanging. I was going to comment what a lovely painting that was. Still, I'm a little shocked still. Oh my gosh. Talking a little bit towards the future, what do you hope is your legacy as both an artist and an educator?
I don't really think about it because, like, for me, it's about playing. It's just about fun. I just enjoy it. I mean, and I enjoy it whether it's felt or whether it's mosaic or whether it's like I've created a little sculpture trail outside, and like I've made mushrooms out of egg boxes and things I found on the beach, and I know egg boxes that cardboard egg boxes, which I have painted with acrylic and then dipped in varnish to make it weather resistant. But I mean, it's just playing for me. It's just fun. I think for me, I would like art to be less elitist and more accessible. And, that's why I've made that sculpture trail, because it's quite frivolous and childlike and colorful. And some people I've actually had cars come up, park in the drive in the park. It's a very small car park. I mean, it's a residential, it's my home, and drive away because I think maybe they thought it wasn't serious enough for them. But I'm happy to lose customers if that's what they think, because I think art should be fun. I think it should be accessible. I think, I try to have, I have some cards, I have some giclée prints, I have some posters, I have some very small pieces that I sell for €10, €20, €30, and I have pieces that are £5,000. So I just want people to be able to come in and enjoy the work, not feel intimidated, not feel like they, can't afford the work, and be able, and if come in and just look at the work and leave. They don't have to buy something. It's not like a church. It's not like something you have to be in. And I just find art galleries, and we've kind of done that in society. We've made art very elitist. So yeah, maybe that's my legacy, is to make art more accessible and make it fun, and have more people enjoy it and not have people intimidated by going into galleries.
Emily said, "What speaks to us in art shouldn't have to be elitist." 100% agree. What advice do you have for people that are maybe not as well versed about art. Say they're going to a museum or they're going to visit your studio. What's one piece of advice that you would give to them before arriving at said museum or art studio?
To not be intimidated by it, and enjoy it, and and feel entitled to be there, and um yeah, just basically give it a chance, go in and see, overcome that resistance you might have to, this isn't for me, or it's posh, or it's, you know just go in and see, and you'll be amazed. You'll be actually probably find lots of things that you enjoy, and you'll probably actually do what most people do and say, "Oh my God, I could do that." Especially when they come to the abstract, more modern art, where people are, uh, I don't know, Jackson Pollock splashing paint on a canvas, or uh, and realize that, yeah, art has many forms and many, just, yeah, it's just many different types of art.
Wow. Yeah, I am not always great with words, and I'm not always great with art. My art speaks through the stage and through like acting and music.
Hmm.
So being able to talk about that, I think that's one thing that I would struggle a little bit with. Um, but I would love to come to your art studio, and I would love to be able to walk past your incredible sculpture garden that you've got. And if you don't mind, I'd bring my own egg carton and I'd decorate it. And if you don't mind,
Yeah,
I'd
there
leave
you
it there
go.
for
You're
you.
more than welcome. Yeah.
Perfect. Talking about your art gallery, I do want to take a second to plug both your website and your art gallery. The website that you have is berniedignam.artist.ie. You can get, she has several prints, she has several other works that are available through her shop, as well as some information about her gallery. But can you tell our listening audience where that gallery is so that they might be able to visit you?
Yeah, the gallery's on the west coast of Ireland, and it's between, I call it the center of the universe, because it's between Clifton, which is the town in Connemara, the capital of Connemara. It's between Clifton and Letterfrack and Cleggan, which are two small villages but quite dynamic. I'm actually quite close to Kymore Abbey, which would be one of the biggest tourist attractions in the country. It's got a lot of history attached to it, and it's run by nuns, and it's an ancestral estate, and it's now got, an interpretive center. And actually Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, the American university organization, are involved, partnered with Kyle Abbey. So yeah, it's in Galway. It's a very beautiful part of the world. Um, I'm on Google Maps, and we can. If you Google me, it usually comes up, gives a little bit. There's some photographs of the gallery and some of the work that I produce.
Yeah, I did find it on Google. Emily and I are actually making plans at some point to go to Scotland to visit a tattoo artist and author that we interviewed a while back. Um, I think we should also include Ireland to come see
I
you
think
at
we
your art
should.
studio.
Yeah, keep in touch.
Absolutely. Bernie, I I love the enthusiasm, and I love the fact that you approach art with just a very open mind. Um, sorry, Emily says, can confirm Bernie art pops right up. Emily says yes, emphatically in all caps. Um, Bernie, I love how much joy that you just bring to it, and with such abandon for things, and it's just to have the fun. And that's what I think is missing sometimes in art. And I'm so glad you bring that every day to your art. And thank you for sharing that with us today.
You're more than welcome.
My last question for you, and this is not related to anything we've talked about so far. If you were to sit down and have lunch with anybody in the world, alive or dead, who would be sitting on the opposite side of that table?
Oh my God, Nikola Tesla.
Why Nikola Tesla? I'm intrigued.
I just think he was a fascinating man, and I think it's interesting he was left out of the history books, and you realize when you do discover him, what he actually discovered, like radio, internet, energy. He just seems like a fascinating man. I just think I'd love to meet him.
Oh my gosh. Now you got me reconsidering my own choice. Dadgum. What a great choice. And then Kristen said, it was delightful to listen to. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, Kristen. Thank you. Well, Bernie, thank you again for being on the podcast with us. As soon as we get in touch with Nikola Tesla, we will be in touch, whether it
Great,
be.
yeah.
This episode, along with other episodes, you can find on our website at themodrom.com. You can also find behind-the-scenes conversations on our Patreon by searching for The Modrom on Patreon. More announcements and more will come. Please follow us on social media. But thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.